We're live. I'm Anna.
And I'm Jessica.
And this is Why Are You Yelling? Formula One edition.
Yeah, Formula One review edition.
Let's talk about Hitler.
That'll make sense later.
I'm immaculately conceived.
I don't know what to do.
I swear I'm not stupid.
Take it or leave it. Sometimes you just want to leave it.
If I gotta borrow my mom's underwear, I'm borrowing her underwear.
You just, yeah.
Misa likes the Jar Jar Binks.
I'm not gonna edit it out.
Oh no.
I don't know. Like, I think it was pretty great. Just staying on the planet.
Suck.
Why are you saying it with a question mark?
Clap, bitch.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Action.
Okay, so just to let you guys know, we are still going to be doing our normal Why Are You Yelling episodes, but
They come out like every month or so, you know?
Yeah, you get them when you get them. But because Formula One is such a major interest of ours, and we don't want every single podcast episode to only be about that stuff, and there are other things we still want to talk about, we decided that we're going to just give you more podcast episodes. So we're going to have a separate episode most weeks. Any week that there's a race, a Formula One race, we'll have an episode solely dedicated to recapping, covering that race, giving our opinions, thoughts, etc. And then we'll still do a regular weekly episode where we talk about literally anything else.
So essentially we're going from no episodes every week to 2. Or at the very least 1, or, depending on if there's a race or not. So that'll be going more often than not on Mondays, like the day after the race. And then our new day for our weekly stuff, like our normal Waypod stuff, will be Thursdays.
Yes.
So yeah. All right. Guess we'll just hop into it.
Yeah. So this is the first race of the 2025 Formula One season. Thank God.
Felt like we waited a lifetime for.
I was so excited for this weekend. It was round 1. It is the Louis Vuitton.
Oh yeah, that's a new sponsor.
Yeah.
So that was different. The Rolex is gone.
Yeah. So it's the Louis Vuitton Australian Grand Prix. Takes place at the track is Albert Park Grand Prix Circuit in Melbourne, Australia.
She said it right.
Melbourne.
She said it correct.
Not Burn.
Like I would have definitely said Melbourne. 100%.
Got to say it with the Australian accent. Melbourne.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So we have a loose structure for how we're going to do these episodes. We're going to do our best to follow it. I say loose because, we love to deviate.
And if you're new here, we love to deviate. So,
so if you don't know, now you know.
But we do have a structure to try to actually keep this on point, because otherwise we'd have a podcast for 3 hours of us talking about God knows what. How we don't know where we'd end up.
Yeah. Okay, so our podium finishers for this race, we've got Lando Norris on the top step of the podium for McLaren, came in first. We've got Max Verstappen in second place for Red Bull. And then in third, we have George Russell for Mercedes.
That was sort of a surprise.
Yeah. Was not anticipating him being there, but to be fair, this race was crazy AF.
It was nuts.
But only in the last,
No, literally, I fell asleep
20,
at one point.
Yeah, the last 20 laps, maybe. Maybe even closer to the end than that.
Yeah, the beginning was rough. Then the middle was just
whatever.
A snooze fest. And then it was all hell broke loose at one time.
Yes.
And Lando can finally put to rest the whole, no, he got pole. He kept
the
it,
lead.
and he did a really good job. So Lando, he got it.
I'm very impressed with Lando so far. He seems different than last season, and maybe he did some work in the off season.
Yeah.
I know he's mentioned working with his actual his trainer and stuff, and I don't know if he has started talking like a sports psychologist or if he had some sort of breakthrough. I don't know what it is, but his confidence he appears to be a lot more settled and kind of secure in who he is as a driver, and that he can do this and he can win. He can maintain a lead. There's something about him where I'm like, okay, Lando, let's see what you got.
Yeah, I think too, last year they sort of just didn't really expect to be at the position that they were at. And now I think this year they're already ahead of the game, knowing that we're going to be contenders. We're going to be fighting for this, versus last year when suddenly they're like, we're here, we're fighting. Yeah. So maybe it's just more preparation going into the season, knowing that's your where you might be.
Yeah, I remember a key talking point last season about McLaren specifically, and about some of the mistakes they made as a team, some of their calls being a little odd, was a lot of people saying, you know what, they haven't been in this position before where they're actually real contenders, not just, you know, fighting for wins. Whereas, you know, before they might have won 1 or 2 races a year. Like, they're really fighting for wins consistently. And like, they haven't been in this position where they're challenging. They won the constructors last year. They hadn't done that in like, what, 20 years prior to that?
Something like that, yeah.
So, you know, that was a sort of a talking point last year. They haven't been in that position before. Well, guess what? Started 2025. They have been in that position before. They won the constructors. That's not an excuse now. They've made a lot of mistakes last year, growing pains, that sort of stuff. So now, hopefully this year, we'll see fewer of those mistakes.
Well, we've already sort of saw one. So we'll get into that. So for the constructors standings, we had 7 different constructors finish in the top 10, which was pretty nuts because normally I feel like we just always kind of see the same people, but that was crazy. So
usually I want to say at the most it's going to be like 5 because it's pretty consistently like the teammates finish pretty close to each other in the top 10. So it was nuts seeing 7 different constructors in the top 10.
I mean, we had McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull, Williams, Aston Martin, Sauber, Ferrari. They all finished those. So I mean, that's insane. So you just have like 3 that didn't, which is crazy.
Oh, so I have some fun facts from this race. And I love fun facts, statistics, records being broken, that sort of stuff. So I've got a couple from this race. We'll go through them real quick. So Lando Norris, by winning this race, this is his 5th career win. And he only got his first career win last season.
Miami.
Yeah, so this is his 5th career win. It's the first time in his career that he has won consecutive races if we're counting the finale of 2024, the last race of 2024 he won. So if we're counting that, then this is the first time he's won consecutive races. He now leads the Drivers' Championship for the first time ever. And that also ends Max Verstappen's streak of leading the Drivers' Championship. So he was on a 63 race streak of consecutive races of being in the lead of the Drivers' Championship, which amounted to 1,029 days. So for 1,029 days, he was leading the constructors and never fell below first place.
The drivers.
Huh?
The drivers?
I meant the drivers. I said constructors. You know what I meant. Lando is also the first McLaren driver to lead the championship since Lewis Hamilton in 2012, which that would be 13 years ago. Oy.
That's crazy.
Over a decade. Wow. McLaren. Props, McLaren. Let's go. Let's go, papaya.
The whole papaya thing, I literally, even watching F1 TV, I hear them go, there's the papaya. There's this, even when they're talking about like the color of the racing lines, or they're talking about the data. And I'm like, I wonder if there is some sort of, they can't say orange.
Yeah, I mentioned this to you
when
we were watching, is it at the qualifying or the race itself?
Something
I forget.
like that.
But I specifically noticed it. Oscar Piastri was doing an interview where he said something about the orange. He was probably talking about the livery of the car.
Yeah.
He said something about orange, and then he corrected himself and was like, oh, no, sorry, papaya. So it made me wonder, and about the point, I wonder if that's like a branding, standard guideline thing, where they're like, if you're ever referring to the color of the car or the color of McLaren, you cannot say orange. It is papaya.
Yeah.
And I know they call their, like, the fans, is it the Papaya Army? Is that what they call them? Papayas? Papaya Army? Something like that.
I don't know. I'm Team 44. I don't know. I'm not sure.
But yeah, so that was just something I noticed.
No, I noticed it when Alex Brundle was talking about the difference between Lando and Oscar's lap before the race started, when they were talking about in qualifying.
And how consistent.
And they were like,
oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, they were talking about the papaya line versus the white line. And I was like, okay.
So how consistent as a brand? Like, whose job is it? Who works for McLaren to enforcing brand standards and consistency that anytime somebody calls it orange, they're like,
Voldemort appears,
sending an email or immediately like appearing right beside them, like,
no, literally,
it's papaya.
it's so weird. But yeah, anyway, continue.
So another fun fact is that so Lando has won 5 times. He's won 5 races. 4 of those wins Max has finished second.
Max was on that ass.
And I don't know exactly what this statistic signifies or if it means anything. It's something worth noting, I guess.
I think it's just highlighting the story between McLaren and Red Bull the past, like, last season and how it might go into this season, at least at the start.
And Max is going to be on that ass.
Max was like, if another few laps, he probably would have had it. But I don't know.
He said in the press conference after the race, someone asked him that if you had, 1, 2, 3 more laps, do you think you could have caught him? And he said no.
Well, yeah. Well, probably by that time he had pushed too much, so his tires would have been done. So yeah, that makes sense.
So moving on from McLaren and who's the other? Red Bull. Jesus.
Red Bull. Not to be confused with Racing Bulls. Red Bull.
Is that what they're calling themselves this year?
Visa Cash App RB is now Racing Bulls. Yeah.
They finally decided because they were trying to be Racing Bulls last year, and then
they're supposed to be
Visa Cash App came on board as a sponsor.
They're still RB, but they're racing. I'm pretty sure the official name is now Racing Bulls.
So no more V Carb. I liked V Carb. Visa Cash App.
You know not to get attached with them. You literally know better.
They're little sluts. They're little sponsor sluts.
Red Bull, that whole thing, they're just driver sluts. Like, don't get attached to anybody.
That's true.
You're not safe.
Only Max.
Only Max. For now. I'm kidding. He's probably
through 2026.
Yeah.
But according to him, that's when his contract is supposedly ends. So moving on from them. So Alex Albon finished in 5th.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, initially there was some... it was 4th, but then a penalty for another driver got rescinded. So it dropped Alex back to 5th. Yeah. But it says discounting the 1-lap 2021 Belgian Grand Prix, 5th place for Alex was the best result for Williams since 2017 when Lance Stroll took P3 in Azerbaijan.
Huh.
Which I was like, the most interesting part of that fact was I was like, Lance Stroll was on a podium at one point.
Yeah, I forgot. I wouldn't have even, I forgot. I just didn't know.
I was not, which 2017 was before Drive to Survive started. Yeah. So there would.
I knew he was on Williams at one point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't.
I'm like, crazy. Oh, interesting. That's nuts. But yeah, so 5th place is the best finishing result for Williams since 2017. So Kimi Antonelli, driving for Mercedes, finished P4. Mm-hmm. Kimi is one of our 5, 6 rookies, somewhere in there. I don't know.
Yeah.
But he's one of the handful of rookies this season. He finished P4, so he becomes the 69th driver to score on his F1 debut.
Well, good for him.
And he is also the second youngest point scorer in F1 history behind Max Verstappen, because Kimi Antonelli is 18 years, 203 days old.
That sounds like when those moms are like, my baby is 33 months old. That's crazy. He's a baby.
He is so young, and he looks young.
He looks young, yeah.
Like there's some young drivers that I think look older, but he looks all of 18 years old.
No, he looks like a little baby.
So Lance Stroll finished P6 for Aston Martin. And
which literally out of nowhere, I was like,
okay, all right, pop off, Lance.
I was like, wait, that's not Alonso.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, that's Lance.
And so incidentally, he has scored his best race result of the year in Melbourne in each of the last 2 years. So not including this year. So, and I was like, okay, let me verify this. So according to Wikipedia, in 2024, he finished 6th. He finished P6 in Australia. And then the year before, in 2023, he finished P4 in Australia. And both of those were his best results of those 2 seasons. And then he finished P6 again this year. So,
damn.
Okay, Lance.
He likes Australia.
Yeah. And then we had Nico Hülkenberg finishing P7 in a kick Sauber, which, where did that come from, Nico?
Some of these results we're super surprised by, but we also need to consider how many people we lost, which we'll get to.
Yes.
So,
we will get there. So with him finishing P7, that means that Sauber has scored for the second time in 3 races, if we include the last 2 races last year.
Yeah.
After going pointless in the first 22 races last year. So, huge improvement off the bat, off the jump.
Immediately better.
So, good on Nico. He also has now finished 7th. He loves P7 in Melbourne because he's now finished P7 in Melbourne 6 times in the last 8 years.
You know what? He's in the points.
He's consistent. We love a consistency
love it.
king.
Good for him.
And now we get to the depressing part of our not so fun stats and facts.
Yeah.
Is that Charles Leclerc for Ferrari finished P8, which is his worst result since the British Grand Prix in July of 2024. And Ferrari, we will get to a little bit later.
Yeah.
Ferrari did what Ferrari does.
I think all Lewis Hamilton fans are feeling victim to it. I think he finally felt victim to it. We're all in this boat now. Like,
and it's I'm glad he's getting to experience it early. It's like, he had
he needs to fix it now. Fix it, Lewis.
So Lewis did finish P10.
Yeah.
So on a positive note, he did score a point in his Ferrari debut, which is about as positive as we can possibly be right now.
Yeah, that's pretty much as all I
silver lining. He's
gotta love
a point.
He got it.
A point.
Yeah.
And then so one of the major sort of headlines of this particular race is that only of the 20 drivers, only 14 finished the race. And that's the fewest to finish a race since the 2023 Grand Prix in Brazil.
Yeah. It was rough. It was rough. Yeah, so we had 14 drivers finish, and that is because of the villain of the weekend, which was the rain. And I don't know who did or didn't watch, practice, qualifying, whatever, but really the most interesting part was we had no rain at all. None in qualifying, none in practice, nothing. And then here comes the rain on race day.
Here comes the rain.
Yeah. It was so bad, the Formula 2 race was canceled.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to delay the start, and it got to the point where it just wasn't going to happen. So the rain was just had a vengeance. I don't know. It caused so much inconsistency on the track.
Chaos.
The engineers had no clue. It was like everybody was making last minute decisions, and then the poor drivers are just wrecking in straight lines.
Yeah, the everyone was just crashing out left and right. So before the race even starts, they're on the formation lap, literally just to get their tires a little warm before it's lights out and away we go. And then Isaac Hadjar, driving for Racing Bulls.
Yep.
Just
done.
Don't even know what happened. He just lost it into the wall before. And he's one of our rookies. So on his Formula One debut, because some of our other drivers, rookie or not, have driven in Formula One as reserve drivers in previous seasons and stuff. He's never driven a Formula One car, never been in a Formula One race before. And this is his debut. And he just crashes out on the formation lap. And you just felt so bad for him because you can see he was crying. You can tell he was visibly upset.
Yeah.
And
I think Isaac was a reserve driver, wasn't he? I think he's driven a Formula One car before.
Maybe in testing.
For Red Bull. No, I think he was a reserve driver.
He's never been in a race.
No, he's never raced. But I'm saying I think he's participated in practices before.
Yeah.
But so he's been in a Formula One car, but never raced one. But I think didn't he wreck the Red Bull car when he practiced it? Isn't that where the meme comes from? Where he goes, "I destroyed the fucking car," or whatever.
No, that was from a different Formula One series. Or Formula Series, sorry.
Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Because he was much younger. His voice is all screechy and high pitch.
Okay. But anyway, yeah, it was his F1 debut.
Didn't actually debut.
No, yeah, so he still hasn't debuted.
Yeah, he literally didn't. Everyone else got a DNF. He got did he get a DNS? Did not start?
I don't know, actually.
Hold on, let me look. Let me see what it...
I think I have that all pulled up. It says DNF right here.
Yeah. I don't know.
Did not finish. He didn't. He didn't start, but...
Yeah, I would argue that's a DNS.
Do they even do DNSs though? Mm-hmm. Okay.
They do DNF, DSQ.
Yeah.
DNS. And there's another one.
I don't know.
I feel like, but I don't remember. But I would argue he didn't even start the race.
Yeah, so that happens, and then they have to. It delays it like 15 minutes
because they have to clear all of his stuff off the track, and then when those freaking cameras were on, I feel like they followed him for an uncomfortably long amount of time.
They really did,
because he is just so upset, cry. Like a lot of different people are coming up to him trying to console him and be like, it'll be okay and you'll bounce back, and he's just so visibly upset. And they follow him walking almost all the way back.
No, it's quite literally like.
Can you give him a second? Like,
yeah. So that was one of the rain's victims. So like the rain was just literally the devil. Mm-hmm. Which we'll get into further because it had more victims.
Yes.
Isaac was just the first.
Yes. First of many. So the race was, they did a, what are they called? They did a aborted start.
Yep.
So they had to redo the formation lap again after they cleared everything off the track. So we do that formation lap, all good. And then we start the race. And not very far into the race, we get another crash out.
It was Jack. Jack was gone.
Jack doing, and again, seemingly just on a straight line, just like, boop, into the wall.
Yeah, that was, I mean, it was literally one lap after. Oh my God. That was insane. That was just sad. I mean, it's just, and then God, it cuts to their families, and their families are just like devastated. And I'm like,
because he's also Australian.
Yeah, that's right.
And I completely kept forgetting that fact because they were so focused on Oscar and this being his home race that I just completely forgot that Jack Doohan is also from Australia.
Yes. So really going into the weekend, everybody was kind of unsure because of the rain. And then, we lost 6 drivers total. So we lost Liam Lawson, Carlos Sainz, Gabriel Bortoleto, Fernando Alonso, Jack Doohan, and Isaac Hadjar. So, I mean, it was already like nuts. And
every time one of them crashed out, which one of the times, it was like, I think, was it when, hold on. It was when Jack crashed, like a second later or right around the same time as when Carlos Sainz lost it and crashed too. So it was like, we already were like, oh, Jack has crashed out and there's a yellow flag. And then the camera cuts and then we're like, Carlos, no.
That happened multiple times because literally it was like, oh God. Who was it that?
There were multiple times when people like spun out and like it would be multiple spin outs happening at the same time or right after each other.
It was like, I think it was Bortoleto and Lawson, I think, were around the same time they crashed. I think Alonso was by himself. But yeah, I mean, it was all within this time period where it was literally like the second we got going, you got a few laps and then suddenly all hell broke loose. And it was
again. There were so many safety cars and yellow flags and basically delays of the actual like racing.
Oh yeah.
That most of the race, I'd say probably 60% of this race was done under a safety car.
It felt like it. And it was just because the engineers were having to gamble when the rain was going to show up, what parts of the track were going to be affected by the rain, where was the rain going to gather up. They're on inters. Okay, well now the track's dry. We need to get on slicks. Oh, well, shit, here comes all this rain. How long is it going to last? Do we get on inters? Do we not? Which is exactly what Ferrari failed to call the right call on, which was
surprise.
I already feel like I need to get a therapist for myself to probably deal with this season for Lewis, because it's definitely different being on a part of the team. But I'm a part of the team now.
Yeah.
Or caring more, where I'm like, fuck me. I mean, it was always funny to watch you guys suffer, but being a part of it's not fun. And I think Lewis also isn't going to be having fun because, let me tell you something. I feel like Lewis is a very composed human. Mm-hmm. And I don't think a lot of his messages get bleeped that much. But that man, I don't know what word he said, but it had to be bleeped because he was so frustrated with just like, he's adjusting to the car. It's a different engine, so.
It's a different team, it's like literally you go from one company doing one job to another company doing the same exact job, but their operating process is different. Your entire team is different. It's like you went from using Windows computers and now you're trying to figure out how the fuck to use a Mac.
Which, like, yeah, and that's because, I mean, the steering wheel's different. There's this mode, that mode, all this stuff. And so literally at one point, Lewis and Charles were both over it. They were both so done.
Oh my God. It was so funny on the radio to their engineers. They were just like, shut up.
Literally.
Let me drive.
And poor Lewis, I mean, he's had a relationship with Bono for 13 years or however long. He had it forever. And now at Mercedes. And now he has this new engineer. And he's like, you can tell he wants to go, shut the hell up. Leave me to it. Just do not talk to me anymore. Which Charles, is a little more comfortable with. But like literally Lewis, like he goes, I'm back in P9. Is that right? They go, yep, P9. And I don't know what he said, but he cussed. And it was...
He said, beep.
Yeah, I was like, oh, fuck.
Accompanied by like a big sigh.
Oh, yeah, it was pretty... Like, it was funny, but like not. It was sort of devastating. Because for one moment, we saw Charles and Lewis 1-2. Because at one point in the race. So essentially, the rain came, caused havoc for multiple people at the start. We kind of had our stuff together for a while.
Where it was kind of boring.
It was, yeah, I was like really struggling to stay awake. And then they kept talking about there's going to be this rain, it's going to come up, and is it going to be bad? Is it not going to be bad? So they're kind of having to wait as it approaches to decide. And at this point, they started off on inters. The track dries out enough. Most teams switch to slicks. I think they all really switch to slicks. And then the rain comes. And it's so heavy, there's no way to wait it out to stay. But the problem was when you gambled, when do you change tires? Some people made the right call, like Max made the right call. Ferrari did not.
Ferrari stayed out when everyone else went in to change back into the inters. They stayed out on their slicks, and then the rain came and they were fucked. And so then they had to go and pit. I think they pitted, and then a safety car happened too. So it was a case of like it was just really unfortunate.
The whole thing.
The strategy was just the wrong call. It was just welcome to the clown show.
Yeah, it
Hop in the clown car.
That was rough. I mean, literally, Charles is like, I think my water cooler, like.
No, Charles said, I think something's leaking.
Yeah.
There's a ton of water in the seat. And then his engineer says, like, something like, no, like, everything looks fine. And Charles is like, there's something in my seat. And his engineer says, it's just water. And Charles says, add that to the words of wisdom, because he knows the memes. He's well aware. By that response, you can tell that he knows that Ferrari has some weird radios and they say some kind of stupid things.
He's like, what the fuck?
He's like, just add that to the words of wisdom.
Maybe they meant that it's the drinking water that's leaking. Yeah. But at the same, I'm like,
that's what they meant. But to be fair, the entire Ferrari team, like except for the drivers, their first language is Italian.
I couldn't understand a fucking word that Lewis's engineer was saying
like
all.
Their first language is Italian. I'm pretty sure they operate day to day in Italian.
Yes.
But Formula One rules state that any radio communications have to be done in English, and that's for the broadcast essentially. And so they're having to speak in English. So these engineers, I'm sure there's a translation issue a little bit too.
Yeah.
So when he says, "Oh, it's the water," and Charles is like, "No shit, Sherlock."
That was
and Charles also getting sassy with the too much information, which he said to this particular engineer multiple times last season, I feel like. So I'm just like, what's going on here with why does that keep being a problem with how chatty or how much information they're giving them? Or specifically, Charles and his engineer, because he switched engineers partway through the season last year. So it's just interesting that that's still an issue that they're like, I don't need this. Which
a lot of the stuff you don't hear either. Where I mean, whenever I listened to Lewis's onboard in practice 3, and I was just watching him. I mean, you hear him and the engineer talk so much. So, I think there's so much that's not broadcasted that probably, really what I think they've probably done is they've just nitpicked where Charles is finally, that's enough. I don't want to hear no more. So then it just...
Specifically in key moments of the race when they need to focus.
Yeah.
And it's just let me do my job. I don't need you to tell me, because I've heard before where some drivers will ask ask for information where they're like, tell me where, like, I think Lewis did.
And then Lewis said, if I need something, I will ask you. Please don't talk to me. Leave me to it. And then he replied, and Lewis said, I need to be left alone.
It's like,
please leave me to it.
Leave me to it, please. He was very polite. Like, please.
He's trying.
Because you got to build the rapport and the relationship with your engineer. But this is their first race scenario, like actual competing in a race scenario as driver and engineer. So it's just, another sort of like bump in the road of kind of learning and adjusting.
Yeah, it was, that was hard.
Yeah.
That was rough.
So us Ferrari girlies are, we're silver lining optimistic.
In the points, both of them.
Yeah.
We both finished, didn't wreck.
Stayed on track when over 20% of the drivers did not. I don't think, did we have any major, like, I think Charles had one major sort of like spin out.
Lewis spun too, but I don't know if that was, I don't think that was during the race. I think that was sometime else. I think it was just Charles that had a major spin.
Which, to all the credit to these drivers, there were multiple times during the race where a driver would spin out, and whether it resulted in a crash or not, if there were other drivers around them, those drivers have such good reaction times to avoid hitting the person that's spinning out. Like when Charles had his spin out, there were 3 other cars coming like on him.
Max and Oscar, I was like, oh, it's done.
And managed to not hit him into, like, it's just amazing how quick their reflexes are.
No, it's insane.
To not cause any more damage or injury, really, because it's kind of scary, because the way that Charles's car spun out, they would have effectively T-boned him if they had hit him. And I mean, that's like kind of game over vibes,
Yeah,
so,
that was, I mean, even when Alonso crashed, where he crashed was like such an awkward spot, and so then you'd have the cars coming through because there's like 2 barriers and there was no like slip road, I don't think, there. So that was just like, oh shit, that was pretty scary. Which I was kind of shocked they didn't red flag that part.
Yeah,
I was really, because I'm like, I mean, at this point you're having like a truck on there, like it's having to go out there on the actual track. It's not like it's at the edge of the track or like in a gravel trap or anything like that. I mean, it was literally between 2 barriers. It felt like, well, what if? I mean, we've clearly seen on a formation lap someone has spun out. And I was really kind of surprised they didn't like red flag that just based on the rain. But I mean, they didn't, and it ended up being fine.
Which, I don't know, did you watch the driver's press conference after?
No.
So one of the reporters asked, so it was our top 3 finishers. So it was Lando, Max, and George. And they asked them about that. They were like, how did you feel about there not being a red flag at all in the race when, like how comfortable were you, being led by the safety car around when there are, they call them lorries, so trucks basically on track to help, and cranes and equipment and people trying to remove, like specifically like Alonso's car from the track.
Yeah.
When there, like you said, there's no runoff, there's no shoulder, there's no extras. They're going right beside them.
Yeah, especially where Alonso was. Yeah.
And and all 3 drivers were like, no, yeah, it was fine. I felt completely comfortable doing that. And Max even said, he's like, if we're driving behind a safety car and then you do spin out or crash or hit somebody or something, he's like, you don't belong in Formula One. Like, you're kind of stupid if you do that. And I'm like, okay, I get where you're coming from. But also we had people spinning off and crashing when they were on a straight all throughout the race where the car just twitched and like, boom.
I would say normally I'd agree with that in a scenario that's not raining.
Yes.
Like in a dry track.
Agree.
Yeah, I would agree. Like that's, how do you do that? But in a wet track, we clearly saw how much. Not to mention, well, there's also the debris all right there as well. So even for the marshals, it's like kind of like there's live people on the track. There's nowhere else for them to go but to be on the track. I mean, it's not, they don't just pick up the car. They have to clean up the debris. So that Alonso was the only one that I was like, that seemed like it could have been. I mean, it was fine, but that was the only one where I was like,
yeah. I mean, and
sketchy.
with Alonso, like we already said multiple times, the specific part of the track, you couldn't avoid it.
No.
You're driving directly next to him.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, all three drivers said they were like, nah, it's fine. I was comfortable. It is whatever.
Well,
they
then what the hell do I know?
Yeah.
They know more than me.
Clearly.
That's a fact. Clearly, that's a fact. But yeah. Yeah, the rain was evil. That's pretty much the main character of the whole thing was the rain.
Yeah. So there was a couple other driver performances I wanted to mention. In particular, Oscar Piastri.
Yes.
So our hometown hero, our Australian who was a favorite, I think, going into it to win the race. He qualified P2 on the front row behind his teammate. He was pretty aggressive at the start. Like, he was in the mix for that win at one point. He was actually driving faster per lap than Lando, who was in the lead. And he was on him. And then when DRS wasn't able to, especially, he was on Lando's butt way less than a second. Like, we're talking like less than half a second.
He was going to get him.
He was going to get him, I think. But then I guess because the window that they were in with the weather, I think the rain had stopped. The track was starting to dry up in certain spots. And so they were in this window where they were going to have to maybe pit to go on slicks. And with him pushing so aggressively, but they were in a 1-2 lead for McLaren, but they had like 17 seconds between Oscar and then Max, who was in third.
Well, yeah, because Max was struggling on those tires. He had wanted to come in earlier to change, and they were like, no, just hold out.
And he's like, and then he immediately, because he was keeping up with them at first, and then when they were like, no, stay out, he's like, he was not happy with that call. You can hear him on the radio.
Yeah.
Like, okay, all right, I'll do it. But
when he finally went in the pits, that car was everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, he could not keep it at all.
He's sliding all over the place.
It was insane.
But at the point when Oscar, he was in a flow state, he was on it. He could have passed Lando, I think, given another lap or two.
Yeah.
But then because they were basically at that point, if there had been no more rain, if we hadn't have any other safety cars, with that 17-second gap, they were almost guaranteed a McLaren 1-2 finish as long as they didn't crash each other out trying to race. But apparently the papaya rules for this season is that they're free to race each other unless explicitly told not to. And they know to like give each other room and to keep it like safe and on the track, right? And so the McLaren gives the order. They're like, basically, Oscar, hold position. Like, you got to back off Lando. You're pushing too hard. And then everyone, I think, was like, what are they talking about? Why are they literally said going into this race, they were not, like Zach Brown said, it wouldn't be until like maybe halfway through the season or a little further where they may make the choice to like prioritize one driver's race over another depending on the points in the standings and where they were. Mm-hmm. And if he had to make a decision.
Yeah.
And we're already making that decision in race one.
Well, the worst part was he listens. They fuck up like his flow state. And then once there's like a 2-second gap, they're like, you're free to race again.
Yeah. So he backs off just enough to not be in DRS range, ruin the flow state. And then he just can't get it back. It's like you fucked him so bad. And then I think hearing after the fact or hearing some people talk about it, again, it comes back because I was initially like, what is McLaren doing? Why would they tell him to back off if they're free to race? And it was because of that window with the weather when they were trying to gauge when to come in to do the pit stop and all that stuff. And they basically just didn't want to risk it because the conditions were so changeable. But yeah, so basically after that, he was just kind of fucked. Ruined his flow state, ruined his concentration. You can tell, like, he's mad. And Oscar, as a driver, comes across as pretty level-headed and pretty cool. Like, he doesn't really outwardly express a ton of oscillating emotions. He's pretty even keel. But you can tell, you just know happy. He was stewing over that and was like, these motherfuckers.
Oh, yeah.
He was not happy. And then he had the incident.
The incident.
Where and so they're basically going into a turn. It's Lando, Max, and then Oscar. I believe it was 1, 2, 3.
I think it was still a 1-2. I think it was still like Lando, Oscar, Max, wasn't it?
It might have been. Okay, so it was Lando, Oscar, Max. They go into a turn. You can see Lando wobbles and like hits a part of the track. I think he hits like the line. And he kind of like starts to spin out a little bit and go off, but he catches it in time. Max, I think, also had a little bit of a moment right there after Oscar. But like Oscar hits the same exact part that Lando did, but he just wasn't able to catch it in time in the right part of the track, spins off into the grass, and looks effectively beached there. And like I said, I think Max had a moment may have been reacting to Oscar spinning out.
Yeah, I think so.
And so then at that moment, everyone's like, no!
So we essentially thought it was going to be like another safety car for that because they were going to have to come get him. And then all of a sudden, he's in reverse.
I knew. I saw him in that grass and I'm like, there is no way he is giving up and not finishing this race.
He's like, I'm finishing it regardless. And so, I mean, he at one point, because the camera cuts away from him, and because I think the broadcast even thought, all right, that's done.
On the leaderboard on the broadcast, it literally had his name grayed out. And at the bottom, basically showing that he wasn't in the contention anymore.
They're like, wait a minute. They cut back. He's backing up. He gets back on the track. I mean, it took him a minute, but he did.
He was reversing and like just hit. Like, I was so happy because I'm like, everyone, no matter who you're a fan of in that crowd, was like, let's go, Oscar.
Yeah, no, everybody was very excited.
He gets it back on the track, whips it around, and then he manages a very good recovery, I think.
Well, the safety car helped. That happened after that, so he was able to unlap himself.
Yeah,
so
because he was down, I think 2 laps at one point.
Yeah, something one or like 2 laps. And so more of the rain victims happened. We had a safety car. He was able to unlap himself, and then he finished in the points. He finished 9th.
Yeah, he was able to. I think on the last lap, he passed Hamilton.
Yep,
and was able to secure P9. Hamilton finished in P10. But I mean, that was just. Bravo, Oscar. I know, like, and he even said in one of his interviews after the fact, he said, for most of that race, that was an excellent performance for me. He said it was a great drive from me, apart from that one mistake. And that one mistake, because before and then after, he was great. It was just that one little wobble. And even then, I want to say it was Jolyon Palmer in the F1 TV broadcast because they talk about this moment. And Jolyon Palmer, because Laura Winter says, even Oscar said he only has himself to blame for making that one mistake. And Jolyon Palmer is like, I don't know if I'm blaming Oscar for that because, I mean, I think it's just bad luck.
Yeah.
Because his teammate made the same exact mistake, but just was able to catch it in time at the right part of the track.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm like, that was Oscar. Chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Somebody else that stood out to me in a negative way. 2 people. One's positive, one's negative. More just kind of like a storyline is Liam Lawson. He didn't have a good weekend at all. Like the whole weekend wasn't great.
It was rough.
Ended up DNFing, crashed out towards the end of the race, and Yuki Tsunoda finished. I mean, and for a long time, he qualified better than Liam. He's showing Red Bull. Are you sure about that?
Did you choose the right driver?
Like, and it's nothing negative towards Liam. It's more like Yuki earned that seat. That should be Yuki's seat, and Liam should be with Racing Bulls. And maybe he'd be performing better in Racing Bulls because, I mean, you're also throwing a driver that's had limited Formula One experience into a car that multiple people have talked about. It's not the easiest car to drive. Yuki has more experience in a Formula One car. He should have that seat.
Yeah, I saw some people making the argument that, you just got to get, like Liam, getting used to this car, used to this team with Red Bull. You just got to give him a little bit of time. And it's like, oh, funny, because if he needed time to develop as a driver and get used to driving a Formula One car, you could have put him with Racing Bulls.
The development
team, the junior team, effectively, for Red Bull. And then Yuki, who has been in Formula One for 4 or 5 years now.
A while.
He does have experience. Why not move him up to Red Bull? There's some reason, for whatever reason, Christian Horner and Helmut Marko and Red Bull just do not want Yuki Tsunoda driving for them.
I don't know.
I don't know that it has something to do with his skill as a driver. I don't know.
I don't know that him and Max would be good teammates or not. I don't know. I don't think Yuki is going to care that he's Max Verstappen. Some people will care. Some people won't. I don't feel like Yuki would care. I don't know that Yuki would be willing to be a number 2, like to be treated as a number 2 driver, meaning like I don't know that he would. I don't know, and that's to say I'm not sure, and I don't know if that's just me trying to find a reason that's not just.
And Red Bull has said before, I mean, that they do consider Max their number 1 driver, and whoever is filling the second seat at Red Bull, their primary job is to support Max. It is to help him win. And to score points for the team toward the constructors.
Yeah.
But like that's if you're going to accept that Red Bull seat, that second Red Bull seat, you have to do it knowing, understanding, and accepting that that is the fact of the situation. And I mean, I agree. I don't know that Yuki would love that.
But I think Red Bull, they're going to, I mean, if I'm Christian Horner, I'm thinking about how I lost the Constructors' Championship because I refused to get rid of Checo last season after, I mean, it just, not a good performance. Way too long. I mean, and so I'm like, how much time do you have to waste? Yeah, this is his first race. You know, at China, he may completely shock us, and if so, fair enough. But if not, how long do you wait for this?
Liam.
Because you can't just have it be. I mean, McLaren
waiting for Liam.
Yeah, waiting for Liam. Like, how long are you going to wait to make the call of is this going to work or not? Because I need to win the constructors and the drive. It cannot all be on Max. It's that's just insane. I think everybody else has shown like. If they're going to be in contention, their teammates also going to be there to support them. I mean, you know, I mean, the Ferraris finished together, even though they finished lower. I still think they'll probably be finishing near each other most of the time. McLaren will be. And when you don't have that support from your teammate, even if, do you take the risk of putting a driver who may not love being a number 2 but can finish in the points, or do you just hope for the best for a driver who can't finish a race? As of now, and granted, I know that's not really a fair thing for Liam because he's clearly finished races in the past and he's shown he's a good driver. But we'll just have to see in the next 2 or 3 races, I guess, how his performance is. Because, I mean, the thing is, he didn't have a good performance in the dry during practice and qualifying. So at that point, is it just the rain? Or is it the car that he doesn't? It's a completely different car. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think Red Bull have this issue, or I don't know, it seems that they're not quite. The way that they think about and approach their team structure and their driver lineup, it doesn't feel long-term to me in terms of the way they think about it. Like Max is their long-term, but they're not viewing the driver pairings together as a long-term solution. It feels like the last decade, basically, since Daniel left, that the people they've been plugging into the second driver's seat is always a short-term fix. It's who can we get into that seat quickly that we think will make a quick impact in the short term, but they're not necessarily interested in investing in a long-term pairing for that driver lineup, the way that McLaren seems to be, the way that Ferrari has seemed to be. I mean, Ferrari had Carlos and Charles for, it was like 4 years.
Yeah, wow.
And then the only reason they let go of Carlos is because Lewis Hamilton was available and interested.
Yeah, I mean,
if that wouldn't have been the case, I think they would have signed Carlos for another 2 years,
probably,
or if not longer. Because even with like Lewis, I don't know how much longer he has in him in Formula One, because whether people want to admit it or not, age is a factor in how well you can drive and what you can do. I mean, don't tell it to Fernando Alonso, But I think it does play a role. It does matter.
I don't think Lewis, I'm pretty sure he said his contract was, it's not just like a 1 year. So I think it's a multi-year contract.
I don't know how long he has with Ferrari, but it feels like Ferrari's intention is for this to be a little bit longer term. For especially, I mean, they've committed to Charles long term. He's the, il predestinado. So
they've committed to him long term. And I mean, I think this, just to have Lewis help with the Ferrari brand, is just what he's already done for it. So I mean, every other team seems to be like investing in long term. I mean, that's what Williams did with Carlos, and so it's like
that's what they did with Alex. Alex has been with Williams for several years now, and he's talked about. I've seen other interviews he's done out like on. I want to say might have been like the High Performance podcast or something, or Peak Performance, whatever it's called. But he basically talked about, he views Williams as a long-term project.
Yeah.
He's not using Williams as like a stopgap. It's not just like I'm kind of here until something better opens up. He has said he's committed to Williams in the long term.
Yeah.
And that comes across to me, especially with how well Williams seems to have done, or they did do with Alex in this first race. and how far they've come since even last year.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like him and James Vowles are very much committed to the long-term project idea.
For sure.
And I just don't get that vibe from Red Bull.
No.
With, their sort of situation. Even like...
I guess they sort of tried with Checo.
They tried.
And then they said, well, this bit us in the ass. So
yeah, because they put all their eggs in Max's basket. And fair enough, Max did win the drivers last year, and he's won it the last 4 years. So it's not necessarily the wrong basket to put your eggs in. I just don't know. But
money-wise, they don't get that. They ain't getting that good constructor money.
No.
From finishing... third?
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see Liam develop and to see what Red Bull, I mean, and he may prove everybody wrong and I may be eating my words next Sunday. So fair enough. Hopefully. So we'll just have to see. But that was something my biggest letdowns were that situation. Or maybe it just was interesting to see. But yeah, so we have something that we wanted to, so we have 5 rookie drivers this year, plus a bonus one, if you count Fernando Alonso. And we thought it would be a good idea to sort of give a report of how each one did for the race, since we have 5 plus 1.
Yes. So we're going to do, since our rookies make up a quarter of the grid at this point, we're going to do a rookie report each week where we just update you on how they've done, what their outlook looks like, if we think that they're going to stay with their teams through the whole season, because it is not unheard of for drivers to be axed from a team in the middle of a season.
Yeah, and somebody who needs to be watching their back is Jack Doohan. That's who I'd be watching.
He's got
Flavio ain't.
Well, he's got what's his name? The driver. Colapinto.
Yeah, Colapinto. He's the reserve Williams driver.
Yes, Franco Colapinto. Jesus Christ, the name was not coming back. I could see his face, but I couldn't think of the name. But Franco Colapinto is a reserve driver for Alpine. Yes.
Pretty sure he's still a Williams driver. He's still a reserve for Williams, I'm pretty sure.
He signed for Alpine. He's like lurking. He's like da-da, 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 da-da.
Or maybe they were saying
he's coming for doing.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
But we've got Franco Colapinto in the wings, just waiting. He's just like salivating, waiting to take that seat from Jack.
He not? I wonder if was he not there
at the race?
Yeah.
Might have been. The reserve drivers don't go to every race. They're kind of like on standby.
But like, what if he would have like broke? Like, what if somebody? I guess they could have flown him out there if he wasn't there, and if somebody got hurt during practice or something, or they couldn't do for whatever reason. Huh.
Well, I think there's a certain point at which even if you have a reserve driver, they may not be able to actually like sub in.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's this, I don't know what point it is, but there's like a certain point where it's like you can't really. I think your regular driver has to at least qualify for the race. They have to finish qualifying in order for a reserve driver to sub in. I think I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I could be
sure.
dead wrong,
but anyway, so the rookie report. So Kimi Antonelli is one of 2 rookies that even finished the race. He finished 4th. He did really great. Isaac Hadjar, like we said, he crashed on the formation lap and he DNF'd. Jack Doohan crashed and he DNF'd. Ollie Behrman finished 14th.
He also started last, I believe.
Yeah, I'm pretty positive too. Yeah,
and finished last, and had an awful practice and qualify. He didn't even qualify.
No, he didn't even qualify.
He didn't even participate.
On the very he went out in FP1, crashed. So during practice 1, but just crashed and didn't participate in practice 2.
Went out in FP3, crashed again.
Yeah,
just rough weekend for Ollie.
Yeah, Ollie had a rough weekend. That was rough. Gabriel Bortoleto crashed, DNF'd.
Was doing really well though. He qualified really well.
Yeah, he qualified well. I mean, he did well, and then just the rain.
I believe he was the fastest of the rookies in qualifying, if I remember right.
And then Fernando Alonso, our 6th rookie, he also crashed. I won't. Damn.
I mean, it was I believe going into this race, I mean, it's a high-speed track. It was going to be challenging for the rookies anyway, because this is not one that a lot of them had driven before, I don't believe.
If they were, I'm pretty sure most of them had, because I know Kimi has, just because I think they've done the feeder series there before. But I'm not sure if everybody's driven it or not. I mean, that's not to say. It could have been a year where they did or didn't because they don't always do it the same year. I know Kimi's driven it. I don't know about the others, though.
But yeah, adding in the rain and then the changeable conditions. And
yeah, that was...
A lot of the newer drivers just don't have a ton of experience racing in the wet.
Oh, yeah, racing in the wet. But also, I mean, racing this rocket ship in the wet, which is completely different than their Formula 2 cars. So, I mean, it was... Yeah. So, yeah, those are our rookies. We'll see how they do in China.
Yeah.
So, we want to do a best and worst segment where we are each going to do our driver of the day and our biggest letdown. I have a feeling our driver of the day is the same.
Probably.
But I'm going with Oscar.
Yes.
I just feel like that was some boss-ass shit, backing up, getting back on track and going, I don't give a fuck if I finish 2 laps behind everybody. I'm finishing this fucking race. This is my home race, and I'm finishing it.
Never say die. Do not give up.
My biggest letdown is Liam Lawson, just because I'm like, that's it's not good for you.
Yeah, so my driver of the day, Oscar Piastri, also my biggest letdown of the day.
Yeah, that's
my
true.
biggest letdown because he could have won.
That's a fact.
And that, McLaren fucked him up, and then that one mistake really cost him big. So that's also kind of my biggest letdown. I would say my part B of my biggest letdown would probably be Yuki Tsunoda. He qualified P5.
That's true.
He was kind of in the mix to finish in the points. And then something happened when, several times throughout this race, it was almost like they put all the drivers in a jar, shook them up, and then spit them back out on the track because of all the,
oh my God,
the safety cars and the pit stops and the changing the tires multiple times. It was just a mess.
Yeah.
And so Yuki ended up qualified P5 and finished P12 outside of the points. There were some positives to take away from the weekend for Yuki.
He finished
the race, but also just kind of let down that he wasn't able to at least score a point.
My part B biggest letdown would just be Ferrari then. They let all of us down. That was traumatizing.
You kind of get used to it after a while,
I'll get numb. I mean, I had to be numb a little bit, with Lewis sometimes because I'm like, oh God, look at this tractor he's driving, especially at the start of last year. So everybody was calling that Mercedes was a tractor.
Yeah, I find that as a Ferrari fan, you got to have your backup. Your backup. So the people that you support, it's always Ferrari number one. But if we have a race where it's okay, we're kind of not doing so hot, you also have to have other drivers or teams that you can root for and be excited for.
Oh, yeah.
That they're doing well. So mine are Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon, and then Oscar Piastri. Those are kind of my backup, root. If they do well, I'm never going to be mad about it.
No.
I'm never going to be mad at them. I'm happy that they, you got to have. Oh, yeah. They're my emotional support.
My emotional support drivers. Yeah, I would agree.
Next race is in China.
Yes.
So just as a teaser, some things to keep in mind going into this coming week. What were the results from last year?
It was Max Verstappen. So from the main race, China was also the first race last season that did a sprint race. It's also going to be the first sprint race this season as well. So last year's main race result was Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, and Sergio Perez. And then last year's sprint race result was Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and Sergio Perez. So one of the things I remembered most from last year was it rained during sprint qualifying, and that was why Alonso and Lewis both qualified so well. Lewis was second, Alonso was third. And because, Alonso's a guy that he's not going to make it easy for you to pass him.
He literally, I remember that being a running joke at the beginning of last season where it's you do not want to get stuck behind Fernando Alonso because he's literally
no, he makes it
sticking his arms out you can't pass me.
He's so difficult to pass. So that was one of the reasons Lewis was able to hold on to that second place was because Alonso was just, by the time people finally passed him, the race was essentially over. I
specifically remember because that
was the first one you watched.
Yes, that was my first one. And Aston Martin seemed quick in the wet during that race, like, and again, he qualified super high, so people had really high expectations. But as soon as they got into the sprint race and it was the track dried up, I specifically remember China. The track has this long straight. It's one of the longest.
One of the longest, yeah,
in Formula One on the calendar.
Yep.
And so I just remember this. There's this one camera shot down that straight where like Max zoom and then Lewis is kind of like zooming. He's trying to keep up. And then you just see Fernando all the way back here. And it took him forever to get to that camera. And then you see the people backed up behind him. And I just remember it being so funny.
It was nuts. It was nut crazy. So that was how China went last year. And so some things to consider for this weekend is it is the first sprint of the season. So the format will be different. We're not going to have as many practice sessions, and so the drivers are not as so, someone like Lewis Hamilton might be having some difficulty adjusting. He's going to have less time to adjust for the main race, but it could also be a good thing to get some race pace to see the adjustments, so it's kind of a give and take. There's 2 DRS zones. F1 Academy will also be there this weekend.
Okay.
So that will help develop the track as well. So it won't be just like a track that hasn't been driven on. And so, I mean, I'm sure it's being used as well throughout the year, but at least there will be other cars on there to throw some rubber down on the track. And it's the start of this race is always pretty interesting because it has a really unique start with just like how tight the turns are. And then the track is known for having like really high G-force corners. And like you said, it has like one of the longest straights of a track for the calendar. So we'll just have to see how it goes. So I think Williams will probably perform pretty well just because they have the fastest car in a straight line. I can see this being a good track for Williams. But that being said, because of how tight the corners are, it might be their downfall as well. So we might see Williams get down the pecking order a little bit just because of the tight turns and things like that.
So it's not a fast start because it's like hairpin kind of turns at the beginning. And the reason the corners are have such a high G-force is because you have to brake so hard going into them, but you're still trying to maintain as much speed as possible that it is pulling you.
Yeah.
But this is an interesting track in that a lot of times cars either are really good on straight line speed, or they're really good in like the lower speed corners. But they may not necessarily be good at both at the same time.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see see whose strengths are where. And I don't know what the weather's going to be like yet, but, we'll see. But, guys, I think that pretty much covers our very first race review.
Yeah.
I think we did as good as it was going to be for the very first time.
Yeah, it'll only go up from here, surely.
It's only going to get better. So, all right, well, we will talk to you next time after China. Let us know your predictions in the comments.
Yeah.
You're right. Bye.